Welcome to another episode of Your Life Simplified. I'm Scott Sturgeon, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into a topic that I think is likely relevant to many of our listeners' lives, and that's working from home. Since March, or I guess maybe March or late February, whenever the time frame started, many of our listeners have been, in fact, doing their daily jobs from the comfort of their living room or their basement, or maybe the discomfort of their child's closet, or whatever space they can find. But obviously, with that comes some changes, whether it's in your workflow or kind of the way that you engage with your colleagues or really just your overall health. And so today, I think this is going to be a great episode. Today, we're going to talk with Samantha Cooper Cauthon. She's a facility manager and physical therapist with Athletico Physical Therapy. They have offices all over the country. And Sam, personally, my own bias, I think Sam is a terrific physical therapist. She helped me with some shoulder issues I was having the last couple of years. Just a terrific gal, and I really look forward to this conversation. So, Sam, is there anything in the intro I missed that that needs to be shared about your tremendous background?
Hey, Scott. No, I think you covered everything. Just a brief background on physical therapy in general. Physical therapists now have Doctor of Physical Therapy degrees. So I like to joke that I'm Doc Sam now. But I really like, getting people moving and teaching and educating. So I'm excited for this conversation. Athletico is a company that started in Chicago, actually, in 1991. We have expanded since then to 12 different states. We have 500 locations. It's been really fun to work for Athletico. We've been in the Kansas City area for the last 3 years, and we've really just grown and made it a point to kind of integrate ourselves into the community. So we offer physical therapy, occupational therapy. During this time, we've also started to offer telehealth for the people who can't get into the office. And then we also do free assessment, which just gives you the opportunity to chat with a physical therapist for 30 minutes and kind of be like, hey, I tweaked the shoulder. Will it go away, or do I need to do a little bit more formalized care?
Yeah.
So it's a great way to just ask the question without having to jump through any hoops.
No question. That's great. It's just a really good way to very quickly diagnose if it's something very serious or something you could, provide some help for. That's awesome.
Exactly.
So I think just to start things off, we kind of briefly chatted before we recorded. But I think since people started working from home, there have likely been, this is kind of my guess, if you will, some trends that have arisen in, whether it's just in the healthcare space or the physical therapy space. Have you noticed any kind of changes in your patient population since, maybe since March-ish, in that time frame, with people that are at home at a desk all day?
It's been interesting. I would say, the first part of this process being at home, March, April, May, we hit a pretty big drop off just because people weren't comfortable being in the community and things like that. And so what I saw was, because people weren't seeking help quickly, I got more chronic back and neck pain issues, things that would have probably been addressed pretty quickly, pretty easily. It just kind of exacerbated with working from home. A lot of people were sitting on couches or at their kitchen counter and just didn't have the best setup because they weren't prepared for it. So I think the biggest trends would just be like that back and upper neck pain. And then honestly, stress management, because let's be honest, this is a stressful time. and stress can really, increase and make general pain worse and make it last longer than it should. So figuring out how to deal with that stress has been another point that a lot of my conversations have been around with patients.
That's really interesting. I guess when you immediately maybe think of physical therapy, it's kind of joints and muscles and that sort of thing, but that whole emotional or mental element is huge. And it's really interesting to hear that you kind of cover that as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't take care of your mind, you're not going to be able to take care of the body. It's, the same thing with, there are times when we talk about nutrition and gut health with patients. If you don't fuel your body, you're not going to feel good to heal. So we're not experts in nutrition or the mental game, but we do touch on those points to make sure we can refer out if we need to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess for those, maybe they've been at it for 9 months, basically working from home every day, maybe some sort of Zoom or phone calls with their colleagues or with their loved ones or what have you. For those kinds of people, what are your general recommendations? Whether it's exercise or nutrition, or do you have general thoughts that you think are good to share?
Oh yeah, it's simple. Move. Like it's as simple as that. And it sounds simple, but unfortunately it's not. When we work from home specifically, we don't have a lot of the interruptions that we have at work. We don't have the conversations with coworkers. We don't have the meetings to walk to. We don't walk from our car to the building. We literally get out of bed and walk maybe down the hall, maybe 2 steps away from the bedroom to your home office to sit for 8 hours a day. And of course, it depends on who's at home, how many interruptions you may or may not have. But I think the biggest thing is just move. So a lot of times I'll tell my patients, every 60 minutes, you should be getting up and doing something, whether it's getting a drink of water, walking around the room, doing a quick roll your shoulders and stretch, set a timer, put a sticky note by your computer, just remind yourself to get up. That's the first step that you can do to kind of get your body moving again.
Interesting. I mean, it's so simple. Literally.
Well, it's crazy, but everyone I talk to, you get so focused with a work activity or you have Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, you don't have the chance to get up.
Right.
And so having the option to put your computer on the countertop, maybe on a couple books, to elevate it for a standing desk might be enough, and then put it back down on your desk to sit. So that sit to stand change can be helpful there.
Nice. That's really helpful. I guess, aside from obviously, standing up, maybe walking to another room for that kind of movement, do you have, a couple of exercises or stretches that you kind of recommend for people that are whether they're, easy to do or can be done in a somewhat of a confined space? Is there any recommendations there?
Absolutely. I think one of my favorites, I call it a desk matrix, just a personal name I put on it. But I love to give this one to my desk workers because you literally can be typing and doing these exercises. So when they tell me that they don't have time to get up and move, I'm like, fine, sit there and move. But it's pretty simple. If you imagine yourself sitting at your computer, then you just want to hunch the shoulders forward, kind of bending the spine, and then coming up, bringing your chest to the ceiling, kind of closing down, opening up, exaggerating that movement. 5 to 10 times, just move around a little bit. And then the second one would be going side to side. So if you imagine tilting your shoulders and your trunk to the left and then to the right, again, it kind of opens up the spine, the neck, the shoulders, even into the low back. And then the third one would just be rotating. So look over your shoulder to the left, look over your shoulder to the right. Again, you're moving the spine, the shoulders, the neck, all of those things that get stiff with prolonged sitting. And you don't even have to get out of your chair.
I mean, how much easier can it get, right? That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, so, I mean, if you do have the opportunity to get out of your chair, of course, there's a bunch of things we can do. One of the easiest ones is to just kind of open up the whole body. So if you have a staircase at home or a chair, you want to put one foot on the chair or the second step of your staircase. So one foot's on the ground, one foot's on the elevated surface, and then you drive your body forward, reaching to the sky, and it opens up that full front chain of your body. So you're getting your hip flexor, you're getting your trunk, you're getting your shoulders, you're getting your neck, you're getting your head. All of it moves really nicely, and you do that, again, it's so easy, 5 to 10 times, and then put the other leg up and do it again.
Right.
It's one of those things that doesn't take a lot of time, but it's so simple.
For sure. I mean, is this maybe a couple times a day, really whenever you're kind of feeling a little tight, whether it's in your shoulders or your back or kind of whatever the case may be?
Yeah, a couple times a day. Again, I said getting up every hour. Doesn't mean you have to stretch specifically every hour, but you could definitely pull that in every couple hours.
Perfect. That makes total sense.
Thanks again for downloading this episode of Your Life Simplified, which is produced by Mariner Wealth Advisors. And at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we're here to serve as your advocate. We help people chart a course to reach their personal and financial goals so that they can have greater peace of mind that may lead to a more fulfilling life. We do this by always putting our clients first. Because as fiduciaries, we're required to provide guidance that's in the best interest of clients, not in the best interest of a company or shareholders or anyone else. So as you listen to this podcast and have questions about maybe your own financial situation, or would simply like a second opinion, or even you have an idea for a future podcast, please go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you found the information on this podcast valuable, please go ahead and share it with a friend or family member that you think might benefit from this information. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and now back to the episode.
When we think about, sitting at a desk, at least in our office at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we have what I would say is a pretty cush setup. We have a very nice standing desk. Our monitors are lined up perfectly. We have a great technology team that handles all those elements for our employees. My at-home setup is, well, at least now it's better, but initially was not great. Is there any kind of tips that you have on someone's setup working from home? My wife corrected me that ergonomics is probably the correct term for this.
You got it.
I'm intelligent, but any thoughts or suggestions there?
Absolutely. It's really interesting. When we work from home, we have to get creative. So a lot of the times I'll talk to people and be like, okay, first, let's look at the desk environment you're working with, whether that's the countertop, your kid's desk, the couch. Hopefully it's not the couch. It's been 8 months. You should move on from the couch. Kitchen table, whatever it is. Take a look at what's going on where your computer is at. The first thing you want to do is get that monitor elevated. If you're working on a laptop and you don't have an external monitor, the monitor should be about eye level, so you're not looking down and cranking your neck every day. A lot of my patients, I highly recommend external keyboards, so that way they can get the monitor up, whether it's on a few textbooks. Again, if you are trying for a standing desk, a couple textbooks on the kitchen counter can be doable. That's where I would start. Now, if you have an external monitor, lucky you at home. Not everybody gets that. But again, the external monitor should be raised on some type of book or stand, whatever it is that you have laying around the house. So the monitor is about at your eye level. The top of the monitor should be just about eye level, maybe slightly below.
Sure.
When you're setting up your computer, you want to be about arm's length away from it. So you don't want to be staring at the screen really, really close, but you also don't want to be so far away that you're squinting. So about an arm's length is what they recommend. Talked briefly about the keyboard. If you had the ideal position, your elbows would be about 90 degrees. So you're not reaching forward towards the keyboard. You're not reaching up. You're not reaching down. Just a really comfortable 90-degree position. So, which is the biggest thing. I'm like, external keyboards for the win every single time. And then of course your chair. Not everyone has the luxury of having a nice computer chair, but having something that's a little bit supportive is going to be helpful. If it has a back to it, putting a pillow or a towel roll under that low back can be helpful if there's not a lot of support. Ideally, your feet are flat on the floor. And if you're on an elevated chair, maybe have a box or some type of wedge under your feet so they can be planted. Kind of grounds you a little bit.
Those are great suggestions. Personal anecdote here or experience, I was having shoulder issues and some back issues early on, maybe in May or June. And I discussed this with Sam and literally sent her a picture of my setup, and she was able to dissect what was going on, and more or less overnight by putting several textbooks under my laptop and monitor, the pain, more or less went away. I was shocked. I mean, this is something that never would have registered for me to do. So thank you obviously for the personal help, but also for sharing. All of that's great advice.
Yeah, I think another quick point, a lot of people now have 2 monitors at home, whether their workplace has set them up or they've chosen to have a more permanent desk. Just a reminder on the 2 monitors, if you use the monitors equally, you really want them paired up together. So the monitors are almost touching, and that touch point or the break in the monitors is about nose level. So you want and then they're slightly turned in, so they're kind of facing you like a semicircle.
Sure.
So a lot of people have questions about the double monitors, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Awesome. As we talk through the work from home, just to wrap up, just within your own mind, and many of these we touched on, I think, but are there any big kind of do's or don'ts for work from home, or any thoughts you have there?
I think the biggest do's and don'ts are just being patient with yourself, taking the time to figure out what works best for your body, what works best for your home life, things like that. It's a crazy world right now. And so if you just pay attention and even ask the right questions and be really mindful about what's going on with your body, I think that's one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself, is just, life is hard.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I respect that. And I'm still going to do something about it to make myself better.
Yeah. Well, if the holidays are right around the corner, that's a great gift. No question. It doesn't really cost you anything either, which is even better. So Sam, one, where we kind of are today, at least as of this recording, there's somewhat of a glimmer of a vaccine on the rise, or on the horizon, a light at the end of the tunnel, some people have said. So kind of looking maybe beyond working from home, if someday, maybe a year from now, whenever the time frame is, we're back in the office or back to somewhat of a daily life. Just for you within physical therapy, what are probably the biggest or most common things you see among different patient groups? So whether it's younger patients versus older patients, are there things that tend to come up that you find could be prevented by kind of these low level activity, or are there things that kind of jump out at you, in that regard?
Yeah, great question. Generally speaking, we're an outpatient physical therapy clinic, so we get more of those weekend warriors, the people who aren't college athletes or anything like that, but they're active and they move and they love to be outside, or to row or to go to the gym or whatever it is that they love. So we see, just generally speaking, people will tweak their back when they're lifting. They'll tweak their back when they're shoveling snow. They'll play volleyball or go canoeing and they'll get their shoulder tweaked. So we really see kind of the general whole body. We do see a lot of, for the older population, balance and general strengthening as well. So physical therapy really does have this huge spectrum of care that we can help with. Balance, general strength, we see people post-injury, we see people post-surgery, but I think the biggest takeaway for moving forward is, if you have an injury that's not feeling so hot after a week, you kind of, let your body recover, but it's still not there, ask for help. If we can get somebody in and they're feeling more of that like fresh soreness, whether it's a fresh back tweak or a fresh shoulder injury, usually therapists can get those started and moving quicker than they would if you went to your general practitioner first and then waited for an MRI and then went to therapy. You're going to end up in physical therapy anyway. Just come see us first.
Never hurts to have a consultation. I would tend to agree. I mean, when you see those kinds of, individuals, I mean, I'm sure I've been out there lifting things in the yard that are heavier than I should be. I mean, are there activities that you can do to avoid kinds of those issues that arise? Or is it again, just a simple matter of staying in motion or kind of preparing your body for those kinds of things? I mean, is there really a solution there?
There's never going to be a solution. It's really just going to be about staying active. Whether that's walking, running, cycling, whatever it is that you love to do, there are ways to create mobility. So like if you know that you're going to be raking leaves or, moving furniture because you're moving houses, like there are things that you can do to kind of prep for that. Easy stretches, you can probably find them on the internet pretty easily. But just kind of prep your body for movement, and it's going to treat you nicely.
Yeah. I would imagine my friends would give me grief if I was, touching my toes and such before I rake the leaves, but there's probably a benefit to doing that. So I totally get it. That's great. Great advice. Thank you. I guess, as we somewhat wrap up, is there anything we missed or points you want to make sure that our listeners are aware of, or thoughts that are good to incorporate into kind of their everyday workflow?
Absolutely. A point that I really wanted to make sure we talked about was the 20-20-20 recommendation. This one's really simple to do at work. It is looking away from your computer monitor for every 20 minutes. The idea is to focus on something that is 20 feet away and hold that focus for 20 seconds. Basically, you're helping your eyes and the rest of your body kind of de-strain from focusing on the monitor for so long. And it's a great way, whether it's an alarm on your phone or again, a sticky note by your computer, just remind yourself to focus on something else for a few seconds and then go back to work.
Perfect. I'm sure you could probably incorporate that into, walking or while you're doing stretches away from your computer. Probably a great time to do the 20-20-20, process.
Absolutely.
So Sam, just to wrap things up, I feel like the question we always like to ask, or maybe a more difficult question, if you will, just to end things. The last thing I want to ask you, and I think it's helpful to summarize a lot of what we've done, is what do you think in your time as a physical therapist, what do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
The biggest lesson I've learned has probably been to just listen to the patient. I have been doing this for about 5 years, and it's amazing the experience and the confidence that I've gained just seeing multiple people come through my door and affecting multiple people's lives. But most of the time, if you ask the right questions and you listen to what the person in front of you is saying, they're going to point you in the direction you need to go. They're going to tell you what they want to get out of therapy, what goals they have, whether it's picking up their grandkids, running a triathlon, or mowing the yard. They're going to tell you what hurts, maybe not why it hurts, but what affects them. And again, if you ask the right questions and you listen to the person, most of the time you're going to be able to change their functional outcomes and make them feel better. And that's the coolest thing, is to watch somebody walk in your door who doesn't feel good and maybe even be a little bit grumpy because they don't feel good, and have them hug you as they leave because you have changed their movements and you make them feel better, and it gives them a brighter spot on the rest of their day, potentially the rest of their life. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from therapy, is how amazing it is if I listen to the person in front of me, that I can really change their life.
That's an experience I can personally relate to, and you're exactly right. That the feeling of walking out without issue or having overcome that challenge or that pain is a tremendous value and a tremendous benefit. And honestly, as you kind of describe that process, it's kind of similar to what our wealth advisors do for clients at Mariner Wealth Advisors, is really just diagnosing and asking a lot of questions and listening to get to the whatever issue, not necessarily a physical pain is confronting them, but typically some sort of financial challenge. There's definitely a parallel there. So Samantha, to wrap up, thank you again so much for your time and for sharing all of this really great insight. And I think I'm certain that our listeners are going to feel the same way.
Well, thanks, Scott. I'm happy to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you all to our listeners for tuning in today. Again, we can't emphasize enough, if you have suggestions or thoughts or comments, we really love your feedback. If you have any of that feedback you'd like to provide, by all means, shoot us an email at podcasts@marinerwealthadvisors.com. Thanks again for listening.
Mariner Wealth Advisors, or MWA, is an SEC registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with a prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.